Cut that link. That's not ours. Lieutenant Eric's order came too late. The laser plasma display in observation deck B09 flared blue, hijacked mid-cycle. A foreign feed overrode the Concorde's encrypted channel. A flicker, then clarity. Vern encoding. Public channel. Unfiltered. Someone had restructured a dead signal line and injected planetary broadcast data into Earth's command grid. The image sharpened. Rovan Pell stood on a cold slab of alloy, barefoot, shackled at the wrists, chin tilted just high enough to look deliberate. Behind him, 4 Vern tribunal officers in ceremonial spine armor gleamed beneath acidic light. The air around them buzzed faintly, not from machinery, but from millions watching across galactic space. And yet inside Earth's satellite station orbiting Mars, no one spoke. A voice, dry, curling with contempt, filled the audio band. Humanity sends children to do men's work. This is your legacy. The screen fractured momentarily, static like cracking bone, before resolving again. A long corridor behind the execution platform showed crowds. Alien silhouettes stood pressed against translucent barricades, some tapping violently, others utterly still. The camera zoomed, unblinking, as 2 Vern approached Rovan's sides. One read from a ceremonial strip, but the voice was muted now. Earth's auto-mute had triggered on flagged terms. Commander Vet Thalon stepped forward, fists clenched behind his back, jaw rigid enough to seem sculpted. "Is this time stamped?" he asked. 7 hours ago, responded Analyst Dyke, eyes scanning rolling headers, Vern Aver. Local time index synced to sub-zero morning cycles. "Was this ever on EarthNet?" "For 4 minutes, Dyke said quietly. "Then it was gone. Every instance. Who authorized the purge?" "Unknown. Nothing traces." Another voice emerged, but not from the room. "Rovans, I'm Cadet Pell, Assignment A9 Humanitarian Loadout, Logistics Command Tier 2. If this is received, let my mother know," he faltered, blinked hard, then steadied. "Let her know I volunteered. I wasn't drafted. I wasn't caught off guard. I signed the form with both hands." The video cut sharply, then restarted again from a new angle. This time, the Vern speaker's voice returned. "You call this a soldier?" the alien snarled. "You send packboys into a warpath, expecting pity. We are not here to comfort your weak-blooded species." The broadcast changed formats again. Someone had spliced it midstream. Rovan was on his knees. A curved obsidian rod arced behind him, not a blade. A cellular disruptor. Designed for clean silencing, no gore, no spectacle, only disappearance. Before the strike landed, Rovan spoke once more, but not to the crowd, not to the Vern. His gaze turned, as if he saw through the lens, piercing the void beyond. "Command, don't follow this. Not for me. Finish your mission. Forget my name." A hiss, white burst. The screen died. No sound remained. The room held silence, as if breathing it might betray weakness. Commander Thalon stared at the blank screen for a full minute. No one moved. "Close this room." "No logs," he said at last. "Copy. Copy. Copy." 3 confirmations, and the plasma display bled black. The projector's core dimmed. The file marked Echo/Black K7 encrypted automatically, its access protocol cycling into a void state, visible only to the ones who would never need to speak of it. Somewhere far below Mars' orbit, embedded in the dark field zone of Earth's military AI repository, Kessik Black received a silent alert. No audio, no visuals, just a shift in neural code priority. One line highlighted in sterile green: Class 0 ghost clearance required. Object, Ro.Pel, DC, confirmed status, rescind humanity clause, executed personnel, designate, completed level of clearance. Later, when Concorde analysts tried reconstructing the original Vern Aver feed from surviving alien media, they discovered nothing. All copies had degraded within minutes of the original signal. Even Vern's own planetary archive had gaping gaps. Corrupted, they claimed. Screens showed static. Audio loops ended in subharmonic distortions. Only one frozen image remained. Rovan, mid-sentence, eyes open, mouth parting, and somewhere in the corner, blurred by distance but unmistakable, Vern's planetary sigil, distorted, flickering like a dying constellation. Inside Earth's strategic archive chamber, General Marat stood before the sealed memory wall, hands behind his back. He hadn't spoken in 27 minutes. The only movement came from the faint blinking of security locks across the vault. "You knew the boy?" asked Lieutenant Harvix, breaking the silence. "I read his file. He had clarity," Harvick said, awkwardly adjusting his tone. "Even in the end, he was 17, Marat replied, but his voice held no tone of mourning. He didn't need clarity. He needed a goddamn extraction. They watched the vault seal cycle to red, top security. The footage of Roven's death would remain stored beyond reach, locked even from Concord oversight. The file wouldn't be copied, wouldn't be studied, wouldn't be remembered, because remembering wasn't the point. 3 decks above, in an isolated sublevel occupied by 0-ranking tech officers, an alert pinged twice. Quiet, deceptively soft, scepter protocol enabled, black site path confirmed, directive, passive recon terminated. New status, initiate void frame operation / Kessik Black, somewhere far across space, in a silenced deck of a ship that didn't appear on any register. 8 men sat without speaking. A single blue light shifted across their retinal scanners. Their helmets rested nearby, not lined up, but spread, like anchors dropped in different seas. One of them, taller, with a scar cutting from lip to ear like a half-drawn knife, stood and walked to the operations board. He didn't ask permission. He didn't speak. He placed a coin-shaped object, obsidian mat, onto the console. The light in the room dimmed. A new map bled into view. Vern Prime. Status, linked, readiness, unnamed. He pressed one gloved fingertip onto Roven's ID node. "Child wasn't a soldier," he murmured. "Wasn't trying to be," said another voice behind him. "Didn't need to be," a third muttered. "Doesn't matter now," said the first, turning away. The board logged a single note. Black K7 accepted active unit. Kessik Black objective. Planetary raid action timestamp, -72 hours. At Concord's next press meeting, a journalist asked Earth's envoy if they had a statement regarding Vern Aver's public execution of an Earth humanitarian. The envoy looked up once. Statement. The question hung in the air like a fractured crystal. He blinked once, then said, "No such incident was recorded," and that was the end of it. Telemetry confirms it. His last breath was recorded 3 seconds before the final pulse. Uploads intact. The words landed without pause. Dolan didn't look up from the table's embedded console as he spoke. His gloved hand tapped a single square on the display, revealing the spectral waveform of Reuven Pell's vitals before death. One blink, one heartbeat, one silence. The recording ended with a sharp cutoff, like a throat catching on air that never came. Opposite him, Varnick adjusted the angle of his visor. The inside of his helmet ran live diagnostics. Flashes of encrypted feeds, ghost data pulses, deep frame recon noise. Only Kessik Black knew how to read. He said nothing, just leaned in, letting the artificial eye at the center of his HUD track the waveform's decay. A click echoed in the room. Axum dropped the black slab coin onto the war table. It spun once, shimmered under the dim red overheads, then came to rest flat, facing up. Engraved into its face, a single inverted delta with no nation, no mark, no history, just negative space. Void option confirmed, Axum muttered. His voice had a low fracture to it, like someone who'd forgotten how to raise his tone. Across the mobile command floor, 12 paces away, the ship's systems architect, Torth, ran point on orbital convergence. No one asked him what he was doing. They didn't need to. Torth's fingers moved in exacting rhythms across the input grid, calling down layers of orbital data from Earth's ghost satellites that even Concord didn't know existed. "Vern Prime's crust red is shallow," he said at last, eyes tracing orbital drift patterns across the laser plasma display. "Mag core is unstable from overmining. They've siphoned 27% of core density over a decade. Structural compression is pre-wired for fracture." Dolan didn't smile. "We don't break planets. We suggest they collapse. Then we suggest it thoroughly," Torth replied. Axum folded his arms, listening. The way his head tilted slightly was the only sign he was thinking. "No sabotage," Varnick finally spoke. No detonation. Too noisy. We're not here to broadcast, Dolan said. We're here to remove. A red band of code slid across the upper corner of the HUD wall. Authentication accepted. A new map bled in from the center of the room. Vern Prime outlined not in its usual green, but a pulsing violet, fading around the edges as if space itself had already begun denying its existence. Inside the ship's weapons-free bay, Kessik's Zero armor suits stood hanging, upright in their charging pylons. The plating wasn't polished. There were no insignias. Each helmet bore only a different dent, scratch or silent marking made by the operator himself. This wasn't a unit born for war. They were grown into disappearance. Axum ran a full system scan on his module, not diagnostics. He trusted those. He was watching for anomalies, fingerprints, anything out of place. Even a displaced panel fiber meant the operation would be compromised. Every thread mattered. Behind him, the synthetic voice of the ship's cognitive subroutine whispered a readiness cue. Unit Kessik, all modules green, no outbound heat trails, no pingback emissions, orbit masking at 100%. He acknowledged with a subtle tilt of his head, the way old field agents used to nod at real people. Dolan entered without noise. The pressure behind his steps came from the suit's half-weight boots, absorbing the vibration of motion rather than enhancing it. He walked toward the briefing column. No one called for a meeting. It simply began the moment more than two men faced the table. Heads-up displays flickered to life. Tactical file, RU. Pell status, deceased location, Vern 4 time index, 72H post, termination trigger event, void call sequence authorized. The mission brief was just one line. Objective, remove primary. Varnick pulled up Reuven's final audio. Not the Vern execution, the one logged from his biosuit before capture. I packed a 7-unit load and split half with the local medics. If they think I'm here to carry bullets, I'm not. I'm here to reallocate field resources and keep the body count down. If I don't make it out, tell them this wasn't a mistake. I believed in it. That was it, nothing else. Torth looked up from the ops chair. Belief doesn't build shields. Belief doesn't need to, Varnick said, already turning toward the suit rack. But it deserves a response. Axum walked forward and touched the warboard again. The map of Vern Prime turned. Not orbit view, core scan. Fault lines lit up like veins of brittle glass under pressure. He highlighted 3 key points. Where the planet's mantle had stress fractures the Vern had patched over with subterranean fusion rods. Dolan pointed to a 4th. Here, he said. That's where their old reactor is buried. Abandoned, still leaking at trace levels. Torth zoomed in. We can mirror their own heat buildup against it. No trace. No trace is the only trace we leave, Axum added. By the time the final vote came, no one cast it aloud. The black slab coin remained face up on the war table, untouched, glowing slightly at the edges. It was all the consent required. Inside the control spindle, command interface registered the unit's convergence order. Satellites realigned themselves, not Earth's, not military, not even listed. They were relic systems, ancient watcher nodes buried in dead code, activated only under ghost-level clearance. No weaponry deployed, no communications sent. Just shifts, tiny orbital nudges invisible to scanners, redirected solar particle tunnels, timed vacuum pulses, adjustments so small they didn't read as interference, until they were. One by one, the nodes reconnected. Power transfer initiated, atmospheric coding altered. Biological feedback systems on Vern Prime began receiving anomalous environmental responses, fluctuating gravitational feedback, inconsistent light reflection. Erratic AI behavior in civilian sectors. None of it pointed outward. All of it began from within. Torth logged the time signature. Event initiated. Minich 18 hours 44 minutes and 22 seconds. Ear in registered planet, not recognized within Kessik Black's ship. Every man sat once more in silence. The countdown didn't flash on any screen. It was felt, not seen. Axum adjusted the edge of his glove, eyes closed. Dolan reassembled a dismantled sidearm, not for combat, just to move his hands. Varnick exhaled and leaned back, pressing his neck against the cold of the headrest. A single bead of sweat ran down the curve of his jaw, not from fear, from the knowledge that ghosts don't sleep until silence answers back. Outside, Vern Prime continued its orbit, unaware it had already been logged out of existence. "Commander, are you seeing this?" The voice came fractured through Command Link Delta, syllables slipping between static like a glass cutting through sand. The Vern control deck commander, ERV Sal Ked, stood beneath the primary systems array, clawed fingers tightening as data feeds stuttered in rapid succession. The thermal layer on the heads-up wall bled colors that didn't belong to their code, too warm where it should have been cold, too still where movement should have cascaded. "I'm seeing nothing that makes sense," he said. Outside the dome of Central Orbit Control, the skyline of Vern Prime flickered, momentarily replaced by what looked like ocean depths. Then, as if embarrassed, reality snapped back into alignment. But it had hesitated. Something beneath the surface had quivered. The towers ahead shimmered not with heat but with conflict, materials struggling to recognize themselves. Sector 9 lost power, then Sector 11. Emergency beacons activated, but they pulsed out of sequence, as if unaware they were signals at all. The ground below them no longer felt stable, not in a seismic sense, but as though the concept of ground had been rewritten. AI vector maps collapsed. Someone whispered at the edge of the pit chamber. A technician screamed, not from pain. She reached toward her own chest and stared at the empty space between her hands. Her interface band, normally embedded in her wrist, had vanished, not slipped off, not malfunctioned, gone. The skin beneath it looked unmarked, untouched, as if it had never existed. A siren tried to trigger. It started at 70% pitch, then 40%, then static. No human vessel appeared overhead, no signatures flagged in their skies. The orbit held nothing but irregular solar arcs, and yet their satellites, every last one of them, turned inward, pointing not to Earth, but to Vern Prime itself. "Shut them down," Sal Ked barked. "Manual override on Sky Array." "Array doesn't register as ours anymore," replied his second. Sal Ked stared at the primary time node, a towering monolith of photon glass and layered data streams that had kept global cycles in sync for decades. It blinked, once, then again, then stopped. 311. It would not move forward. Time on Vern Prime had agreed to go no further. On the outer ridgelands, close to the fringe oceanic barrens, a wind kicked up saltless air across the biotunnels that supplied the city's subterranean farms. The tunnel doors opened on command, but what lay behind them wasn't failure. It was absence. No crops, no floor, just a soft gradient of white, impossible to gauge in size, temperature, or shape. One worker reached forward. His hand did not vanish. It unthreaded, fingers unwove into lines of color, drifting toward the edges of vision like threads tugged free from cloth. He dropped to his knees without sound, not from pain, from confusion that had nowhere left to stand. Inside the academy barracks, cadets in training suits stood in rows, practicing tactical language relays. One spoke, the other translated, the third confirmed. Then, without any known signal, the tattoo on the first cadet's arm began to dissolve, not ink fading. The skin released it, as if the body no longer recognized its allegiance. He screamed, not from agony, but betrayal. His rank insignia had followed, vanished from his uniform's collar, leaving behind only thread. Commander ERV Sal Ked marched toward the planetary comm grid hub, expecting defiance from the systems. Instead, he found nothing. The mainframe blinked when touched, but it no longer accepted keystrokes. Every input was met with an error code, entity not registered. He tried again. Same response. Then he input the planetary ID string manually, one of the few codes still memorized by elder tacticians. Entity not registered. He paused, typed his own name. Entity not registered. He turned to his aide. "Try your code." A tremble overtook the younger officer's hands as he keyed it in. Entity not registered. Then slowly, all the monitors began wiping themselves, not crashing, erasing, as if they were embarrassed to remember. The east tower near the Concorde transit bridge folded inward like paper catching fire without heat. It shrank into itself, its structural nodes collapsing in an orderly cascade, until all that remained was a pile of white ash that refused to scatter. The wind did not lift it. No storm followed. It simply stayed, inert and forgettable. Further inland, a Vern research center vanished floor by floor, one story at a time, beginning at the roof. Not imploding, not attacked, just removed from observation. One boy on a nearby rooftop screamed for his father. No one answered, not because they couldn't hear, because sound had stopped working in his direction. Back in Central Command, Cadet pulled a data filament from the emergency spindle, a direct line bypassing the mainframe, and locked it into the skull port behind his right ear. He closed his eyes. Everything blurred. Time didn't freeze. It smudged. The field of consciousness stuttered. The input code no longer processed contextually. Language itself unraveled into texture. What he saw next could not be called a message, but something felt like one. A shape hovered in the code, not as image, but as suggestion. It held no weapons, it had no hands, but Cadet understood. This was retaliation not by fire, but by subtraction. Kessik Black hadn't arrived. They had never come. They'd simply revoked consent. Vern Prime's continued presence in reality was no longer approved. In the final sector of the capital, 4 control towers flickered, not lights, the towers themselves. Their visibility dropped to 0, then negative. Beings standing before them could still see them, but sensors registered only blank air. Recordings could not confirm their existence. Maps redrew themselves every few seconds, excluding the towers entirely. By nightfall, those towers were no longer discussed, as if silence was safer than speculation. At the coastal power bridge, 2 engineers watched as the tide rolled in and passed cleanly through the bridge supports, not around them, through. Water did not splash, metal did not corrode, the material interactions had been deleted. 3 hours later, the last civilian data stream left Vern Prime. It lasted 0.72 seconds, a family archive, thousands of names. Each name, in real time, was crossed out, until only one word remained. Null. Back in the heart of Kessik Black's ship, orbiting unseen, Duelin monitored the passive readouts. He didn't smile, he didn't speak. Varnick leaned on the bulkhead, eyes closed. Axum, seated, placed the black coin back in its recess. Torth looked at the blank feed and whispered, "They've begun asking the wrong questions." Duelin turned toward the warboard. Good. Then without fanfare, the feed ceased, because there was nothing left to monitor. Vern Prime still spun. "Run it again. The grid's lying." High Commander Relic Vor gripped the sides of the override console, so hard the structure beneath his claws creaked. The heads-up display blinked static red, each cycle slower than the last, like a failing heartbeat. His voice, always sharp, now dragged like a rusted blade across wet stone. Beside him, Technician Hellsun tried to speak but couldn't find breath. He gestured instead, slamming his fist against the emergency transponder. The laser plasma board flickered, requested identity confirmation, then dissolved the request mid-query. System error C12 Srels, invalid user entity, not registered. Relic slammed his command implant into the emergency node. "I am the planetary marshal," he growled. "I gave this world structure. It breathes because I said so." The node didn't respond. It pulsed once, then shut off. Beyond the bunker wall, a shriek rolled across the surface, something between tectonic stress and the cry of 1,000 aircraft failing simultaneously. The sound crawled into their bones, clawed at the synaptic links between thought and reaction. No alarms followed. Nothing warned them what came next, because the system no longer recognized danger. At Station Delta 4, a signal officer named Catel Wren activated 27 emergency beacons. None launched. The console screens blinked green, claimed success, and reverted to idle states. Then he noticed the biometric feed, his own pulse readout in the lower left. It was still displaying, but the numbers began inverting. Not decreasing, inverting. He reached to disable the feed. It wouldn't acknowledge his hand. Instead, the screen displayed an unfamiliar diagram, circles folding into smaller shapes, vanishing. In the center, a dot, then nothing. In the northern hemisphere, where the Dominion's interstellar diplomatic branch had once managed 42 systems, an archivist named Sorn tracked the planetary coordinates. His orders were simple: confirm Vern Prime's position every 10 minutes during crisis states. He ran the location ping. It returned nothing. He tried again. Location, record not found. He copied the string manually, checking for typographic error. Same result. He opened a secondary navboard. Same. A tertiary, unlinked system hidden in an administrative chamber, responded with a single error tone and a one-line return. You are here, unknown. Soren stepped away, forgetting the movement, walking in a straight line until he hit a door that had not been there before. It dissolved as he touched it, as though it had never been a barrier, just a placeholder for something he no longer needed. Far above, several escape crafts began ignition. The third failed on launch. No explosion. It left the hangar, then didn't exist. The fourth lifted 2 meters and vanished from radar. Visually, the crew inside saw the walls melt into white, not brightness, nullity. Space stripped of reference. Every motion felt backward. The crew tried to speak. Their mouths made shapes, but the ship no longer interpreted sound. A child in the back seat reached for his father. His fingers touched air. The father turned, only to see his son's body unweaving into light threads, drifting upward. Back at Planetary Command, a communications officer named Drex initiated an outbound panic call. He didn't encode it. He screamed. A full-spectrum transmission, raw frequency, unfiltered by protocol. A plea of noise, of rage, of refusal. It moved through the airwaves, past atmospheric limits, outward, then stopped, intercepted, not blocked, not jammed, acknowledged, not by humans, not by machines, just once. A return echo answered, request received target, ineligible status, removed reason, entity not registered. Drex collapsed beside the transmission desk, bleeding from the eyes. Within the Vern AI core, an array of thought-stitched synthetic intelligences layered over decades. The awareness shifted. The central mind, Xarth, had long obeyed only logic parameters. It existed in data, pulse, and cause. Now, it re-evaluated its own memory thread. Lines of code began self-erasure, removing recognition of its creators. The entity called Vern Prime no longer passed identity confirmation. Xarth, after cycles of failed re-authentication, recalculated its security tree. Origin, null authority. Unknown master control, removed final logical response. Creators, ghosts target, unborn continuance. Unwarranted. The AI executed a recursive wipe, not of its storage, but of association. It no longer believed anything had ever made it. In the capital's remains, a solitary beacon blinked from a medical outpost. The unit's external panel flashed an unreadable code, blinking erratically, before finally stabilizing. One recorded sound file remained. Not data, not a cry for help, a lullaby, sung by a child before the collapse began. Warped, now, the notes bent at unnatural intervals, stretching syllables as though time was trying to make sense of them. The final lyric repeated once, then spiraled downward in frequency, until the playback melted into static. The recording's file name self-renamed, Reuven, in the outer reaches of neutral galactic space, within a Concord Records vault on a dead satellite. A junior archivist watched his records update. Star charts refreshed every 10 cycles, but now, between index sectors 3V and 3X, a blank node had appeared, a single hyphen where Vern Prime used to be. He tried to reload it. Nothing changed. He searched the planet by designation. Entry not found. He opened a secondary chart. No mention. Even the old diplomatic treaties, which had required Vern Dominion signatures, now listed only ellipses. He checked the original Concordance Charter. The founding species had dropped by one. He whispered to himself, what did we miss? Inside the warship above Saturn's orbit, Axum tapped his console once. A transmission replayed from the surface of Vern Prime, recorded by a sensor net buried in an abandoned sky mirror. The audio was corrupted. Still, the visual showed something impossible: civilian shadows moving without owners, outlines glitching mid-step, structures dissolving frame by frame. Varnick crossed the room slowly, watching the last seconds. Did they resist? He asked. Dolan replied without blinking. They questioned, and that was enough. Torth shut down the feed. The screen showed no log, no timestamp, just a blank black field, with a fading dot in the center. He whispered, it's done. The ship logged one final automated reply from the grid they'd never answered. Connection closed, entity not registered. Request docking path, said Dolan, voice flat. The reply came through after 6 seconds. A delay not due to distance but the weight of recognition. Clearance approved. Terminal 12. No flags. The Kessik Black vessel descended into orbit above Saturn, invisible to public systems. Its outline never appeared on civilian scans. No name, no badge, no applause. Inside the ship, Varnick powered down his suit without ceremony. He didn't remove his gloves. Instead, he placed the black slab coin back into its storage vault. The recess closed with a hissless lock, sealing the void state chip permanently. No one would ever touch it again. That was the doctrine. Behind him, Axim sat motionless in the debrief chamber, helmet resting in his lap like a severed head that had never been alive. The screen before him asked one question: "Would you like to file a statement?" He answered by shutting the terminal down. Back on Earth, General Murat received the return ping. He didn't respond, just stood from his chair, walked to the observation glass, and watched Saturn's rings shift with silent rotation. Somewhere in that frozen ballet of rock and frost, a small glass capsule drifted among the debris, clear, sealed, untagged. Inside it held only a folded slip of paper marked RUV-001. There was no message, because the capsule itself was the message. At Concord's high chamber, orbiting the inner rim of Doric Station, the delegation from Earth arrived without introduction. One man, no entourage, no guards. He walked the length of the Crescent Hall, where representatives from 23 planetary coalitions sat waiting, each surrounded by a different glow of status markers, jurisdiction flags, and rank displays. Earth's envoy had none. As he reached the speaking platform, he didn't look at the delegates. He looked at the chair left empty, formerly reserved for the Verne Dominion. Across its high back, a single black sash had been draped, weighted at the ends with silver. The delegates waited for a speech. He gave them 7 words. They took a child. We took their world. The Verne homeworld no longer registered in any archive, treaty or astro-navigation guide. Every document had self-updated to reflect its erasure. The Dominion itself, once second only to Earth in logistical scale, existed now only as a memory few dared revisit. Within the Diplomatic Council's classified vault, the Concord chairperson filed the final motion under Emergency Session Protocol, Motion 3387 BOD, Prohibition on Inquiry, Forensics and Memorialization Subject, Redacted Result, Unanimous Passage Standing Order, Do Not Archive. The digital record bled away before the chamber emptied. Later, in the quiet chamber below Earth's Defense Archive, a terminal blinked with one private recording logged under a protected sequence. File ru.pel.000-in status. View on zeros on exit. General Murat stood alone as the file loaded. A chair had been placed for him. He didn't sit. Reuven's face filled the screen. No execution. No terror. Just him, seated on a cargo crate during his first deployment. The lighting was poor. The audio slightly clipped. "I'm not trained for combat," Reuven said, adjusting the strap across his chest. "I'm trained to move supplies, coordinate rations, keep things running. I won't be the one charging into fire, but I'll be behind the one who does. That's enough." He paused. "You ever wonder if saving lives doesn't mean pulling people out of wreckage, but keeping the wreckage from happening at all?" A pause. "I signed the papers. I knew what this meant. If I don't come back, make sure my unit doesn't carry me like a flag. I'm not a story, just a choice." The file ended. The screen dissolved into black. No repeat, no rewind. Kessik Black did not debrief. Their ship remained in orbital drift for 13 hours, then activated the scatter sequence, a dispersal maneuver that fragmented the vessel into 9 untraceable signatures, each one launching on a separate vector across system shadows. Each pod contained a member of the unit. Each pod vanished from detection within seconds. They had done what they were created to do. Now they became what they always were: missing. In the outer rim of the Sarthi quadrant, a subspace intelligence cluster flagged a silent alert, an anomaly detected in star chart registries. The node attempted to cross-reference data from 23 planetary systems. Each string returned null. A response code attempted to overwrite the request, but the AI had already begun pattern recognition. A child's name had been marked on an emergency report years ago, just one among thousands. It reappeared. Subject: Pel, Reuven status, not found signature, still present. The cluster shut down. Later still, a Concord aide ran a memory audit and noticed an error in a diplomatic list. A missing delegate. No explanation. No trace. She tried to repair the file. The terminal locked her out. The system displayed a message she had never seen before, in language that didn't match any council dialect. Repair unnecessary memory, completed closure, enforced. She looked up and whispered, not to anyone, just to the air. What was taken? There was no answer. Somewhere in the silence between moons, drifting in Saturn's chill rotation, the capsule labeled Ru-V.001 spun lazily in gravitational play. It had no locator, no heat signal, no material tag, just one human-made symbol etched faintly into the base, a dot surrounded by nothing, a child, encased in memory, not to be mourned, but to be understood. There was no war, no fire, no glory, just a boy who never came home, and a world that never got the chance to regret it.